Hello everyone, it's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland reviewer, and I'm here to review H.P. Lovecraft Goes to the Movies. And this is a collection of his short stories, specifically ones that wound up getting film adaptations, and I've seen some of these, I've seen some adaptations of Lovecraft, very specifically Color Out of Space with Nicolas Cage, and I really like that a lot. I think it is quite the crazy body horror, insane science fiction film. And just to give a little context, obviously, of H.P. Lovecraft, who his whole Cthulhu thing and the old gods and cosmicism of the fact that we are meaningless in the grand scheme of the cosmos, and he was an atheist and didn't really believe in God, like our traditional God in terms of like Christianity and stuff like that. His influences, like the giant tentacle monsters, and this is so heavily utilized, especially in like the first Hellboy film, which really feels extremely Lovecraftian. And like, Guillermo del Toro is a huge fan of Lovecraft because he really brings in a lot of those ideas. And to give even more context, it's like, seemed like a pretty messed up dude. He died at 46. Looking up some information, and like, it's very obvious that there's a lot of prejudices in his writing as well, including certain stories where it's like looks down upon interrelations and stuff like that. And it was very clear he was very elitist, and he honestly for a lot of his life really believed in high society people are better than others, that the monarchy was a better fit than democracy, and believing that others should rule over other people. And when you're a writer, you can't help but have some of your perspectives bleeding into your stories, and they're definitely prevalent in some of these stories, especially including the depiction of some of the people in them, including the last story in this book in particular, The Shadow over Innsmouth, definitely has some things in there where it's just like, And it's interesting reading this right after reading some short stories of Stephen King, because Stephen King always has that, like, there's some kind of emotional heft there that really pulls you in. I feel like Lovecraft is a lot more intellectual and disconnected, but also very creepy and eerie and unnerving. He did great world building, and I feel like those kinds of things really stick out in these stories. The whole Cthulhu mythos, and like the Color Out of Space, just a strange alien entity that comes in that we have no power over. And those kinds of like supernatural science fiction kinds of things, those fantasy elements that come in, are more to service the horror and the terror, versus, I know in a lot of Stephen King's, it usually services more the character and the people and able to flesh those out. So I don't know if you're going to feel as connected to stories of Lovecraft like you might with a Stephen King, but it's still creepy, it's unnerving, it has a very specific feel to it. You feel Lovecraft's voice, you definitely get some horrors along the way, and terrors, and I feel like that's the point. Like, when it really comes down to it, people read H.P. Lovecraft to have that scare and that terror. And, he delivered on those things. It's just some of the other things, the underlying themes and ideas, are pretty adverse ideas, and are ideas that are bred out of judgment and hate. And those things should be powerful things in terms of trying to express horror and anger and stuff like that. It's just, go in with a context of like you're reading this in 2022, or if you wind up reading this later, but the idea is this is the 21st century, and H.P. Lovecraft wrote in a very specific time and had a very specific outlook on the world, and that bleeds into his writing. And if you go in with that context and understand, I think you could still enjoy some of these stories in terms of the horror, but I also understand if like you don't want to. But just putting that out there, these are still really creepy and unnerving stories, and definitely worth your time if you're looking for something just to do that. Some of the specific ones that really stood out were The Color Out of Space, The Call of Cthulhu. Those are obviously some of his big ones and his most adapted and drawn upon ideas. But those are my thoughts on H.P. Lovecraft Goes to the Movies. Let me know what you think, and let's talk some books. But thank you as always for tuning in and supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.